Bernie Sanders, running for president, running all over this country. Bernie Sanders is, by the polls that seem to give more information, not down by much over Joe Biden. Joe Biden, I don't know what the holdup is now. It seems like he's just taking his time. Reports in the past couple weeks have said he was having trouble with fundraisers. That might have been why he was waiting to enter the field. Fundraisers were a little lukewarm on supporting Mr. Joe and, shall I call him Joe Touchy Hands Biden. So Bernie Sanders, while running for president, is again doubling down on Medicare for All, his signature proposal. He is going to unveil a new Medicare for All bill as Nancy Pelosi and the corporate Democratic establishment say, let's improve Obamacare. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders plans to introduce his new Medicare for All bill Wednesday morning, so that's tomorrow, a move that will again push healthcare policy to the front burner of the Democratic presidential primary. The new legislation's big-name co-sponsors include four of Sanders' fellow 2020 Democratic contenders: Senator Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, and Kirsten Gillibrand. Oh boy. All of whom signed on to an earlier version put out in 2017. But unveiling his proposal now, Sanders is effectively doubling down on his signature policy idea and betting that his calls to eliminate private medical insurers will be a winning one with Democratic voters, even as the party rallies around Obamacare. But the move could light a match to a simmering debate within the Democratic Party, pitting Sanders against other candidates, including some of the Senate bill's co-sponsors, over the best path toward universal coverage. It is a fight Sanders appears to welcome. During the early stages of the 2020 campaign, he has relentlessly attacked private insurers, arguing that their presence is a malign influence on the whole American healthcare system. Warren, Harris, and Booker have all signaled their willingness to consider compromise plans that allow private insurers a role in any new or revamped system. They're up against moderates like Senator Amy Klobuchar, who has said she is not in favor of Medicare for All, and Senator Michael Bennet, who is planning to enter the race soon. Oh boy, another one. Neither of whom are expected to join their more liberal colleagues. Can I just add, why is Congressman Eric Stilwell, who has fomented and pushed this Russiagate nonsense, and now you got Michael Bennet, and you might have former Virginia governor / I have my head so far up the Clintons behind, Terry McAuliffe, trying not to curse because YouTube demonetizes us. Jen, do I get demonetized for saying behind? I hope not. Why are all these people running? I mean, what's his name? Oh, Tim Ryan. I had it. What are all these people running for? I mean, vanity? Their ego? They have no shot. And I don't mean to be like one of these elitists who say, you have no shot, and then they have a meteoric rise. I mean, are they running for vice president? Are they running for labor secretary, dog catcher, to get a CNN deal once they retire? I don't understand. Like, if you have no pathway, sit down. I mean, I could understand why Tulsi Gabbard, for example, is running. She probably knows it's a very, 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 far stretch for her to win the Democratic nomination. But she's trying to get critical issues into the mainstream. She's trying to get on that debate stage, which, honestly, as soon as today, she might announce that she has reached those requirements, because 2 or 3 days ago, she was at 63,000 donors, and you need 65,000. So she's on the brink of reaching the amount you need, 65,000 donors, to your campaign to be eligible for the presidential debates, which will be a great thing. I was happy to interview her a couple, 2 months ago, and I look forward to hopefully interviewing her again. So what I think is interesting about this, you got Bernie Sanders reintroducing the Medicare for All bill. Not so sure if there's tweaks in the bill. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. But already you have the establishment attacking Bernie, even though the people are with him. And I found this interesting. Ezra Klein of the Vox, Vox.com, these elitist wonks who are so smart. They all have wonderful educations. They all live in Washington, D.C. and New York, mostly Washington, D.C. And They get turned on by policy books and think tank reports and all that, but they really have an aversion to talking to actual human breathing people. Ezra Klein says, who cares if Bernie Sanders motivates people? Who cares if the majority want this? It ain't going to get passed. Here's his Twitter thread. You can't do Bernie Sanders' Medicare For All plan through the budget reconciliation process. So he's saying he'll get 60 votes to pass it. There's absolutely no way that's happening. And that was in response to Bernie Sanders not actually saying he would try to get rid of the filibuster. Bernie Sanders said, quote, Donald Trump supports the ending of the filibuster, so you should be a little bit nervous if Donald Trump supports it. Says his ambitious agenda could get through with the current legislative rules. We'll get back to that. Another surprising quote from Sanders, Ezra Klein says, quote, I don't think you could just simply shove everything through. There's an argument for that, by the way, but that's not where I'm at right now. Majority vote is shoving everything through, Mr. Klein asked. He says you can't be a policy radical and a Senate institutionalist right now. Either you keep the Senate rules as they are and accept that very little can pass, or you change the Senate rules to permit a more ambitious agenda. You can't have it both ways. If you take Sanders at his word, he's saying he could get the kind of bipartisan support for his agenda that Obama couldn't, which I don't actually think he believes. So what is his actual plan for passing his agenda? And then they go to, one of these Vox pieces on why Medicare for All will never, ever, ever, ever come to pass. I don't want to hurt your IQ or, health by reading that, so I won't bother. So I actually agree with him on one thing, but I disagree with him on most of it. But before that, I want to reference this clip where Bernie was on with Chris Hardball Matthews from 2016. And I think Bernie Sanders, they don't really talk in depth about the filibuster, but I think what he's talking about here is my answer to Ezra Klein and the corporate Democratic establishment, who are pretending that their real concern is, well, this will never get through, when in reality their real concern is they don't want Medicare for all, period. They don't want every breathing human person to have guaranteed health care. So they come out with these policy-oriented or cost concerns or this, when the real thing is it's none of those things. They don't want it because their donors won't allow it. And when I say their donors, that applies to media too. Media companies are owned by plutocrats. Media companies are owned by multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, and they don't want it either. So here we go.
Let's say you get elected. You take office next January 20th, and you walk up to the Senate, and you meet with the leadership and say, I have a program here. I want to have government-funded tuition for public universities. There are things I want done on Social Security to increase benefits. There's things I want done on health care, so it can become like Medicare for life. You've got very strong positions. Right. And Mitch McConnell looks at you the way he looked at President Obama and says, forget about it.
And then you know what I say? I say, hey, Mitch, take a look out the window. There are 1 million young people out there who don't want to be in debt for half their life for the crime of going to college. And if you want to antagonize those 1 million people and lose your job, Mitch, if you don't want to lose your job, you better start listening to what we have to say. That's the point. That's how change takes place.
Well, how do you squeeze a guy like him?
It's not him. Mitch is, I know
all
Mitch
the Republicans.
McConnell.
How do you squeeze them? 60 senators. You need 60 senators to get a court. You need 60.
Let me tell you this. Absolutely, positively, 100%. If we rally young people in this country to say, you know what? Germany, Scandinavia, other countries, they have free tuition in public colleges and universities. I have been all over this country because I've talked to kids 30, 40, 50,000, $100,000 in debt, paying a huge percentage of their income, okay? Young people stand up and say, we are sick and tired of it. We don't want to go in debt for our whole lives because we got a college education. You know what? We'll win that fight immediately. But the trick is not to appeal to Mitch McConnell. Right. It's to say, Mitch, take a look at your emails coming into your
What
office.
evidence do you have that this has worked for you? Have you increased the turnout in these elections?
Have
you, as a senator, been able to get 60 votes of senators for anything? Have you ever been able to do this?
That's Chris Hardball Matthews, who, loves himself corporate Democrats, loves himself the establishment, loves himself all things faux progressive. So what I think Bernie, let's take what Ezra Klein said and then think about what Chris Matthews said. Let's imagine for a second for you younger people watching, for older people watching, for people internationally watching, all of you. Let's just imagine for a second. Let's imagine that Bernie Sanders becomes president of this here United Corporations of America. Let it sink in. Okay? Do you think that the Democratic Party in the House and the Senate, do you think that even the Republicans, who just lost to, at the time, it will be a 78, 79-year-old socialist from Vermont, do you think they will have a choice whether they can shift radically toward, for the Republicans, it would be radically towards the center, because right now they're not even on the right. They're off the grid to the right. They're not even on the normal, like, whatever the right wing liberal Republican used to be. It doesn't exist anymore. They're all the way like to the right of Till of a Hun. The Democrats, do you think they're going to have the option to stay where they are, which is basically on the right? So where I just said the Republicans are off the grid, the Democrats are where like liberal Republicans used to be. Do you think that either will have the option, if Bernie Sanders has become president, to stay where they are and also stay in office? Because if Bernie Sanders becomes president, that would signify there has been a monumental shift in the electorate. If Bernie Sanders becomes president, don't expect it to be, don't expect him to win by like 500 votes. If he becomes president, it's because there was a huge, huge monumental movement. There was huge voter turnout, particularly among young people. And I'm not signaling out the older viewers, as I always say. I know there's a lot of older viewers and progressives that like Bernie. But if Bernie Sanders is going to win, he's going to have an unprecedented turnout among millennials and young people, especially young people that are black, Latino, indigenous, LGBT, you name it. So if Bernie Sanders becomes president, these people that are, they're not, the truth is, the corporate Democratic establishment and even these Republicans, power comes before ideology. Their purity is staying in power. Their purity is the status. Their purity is the money. So they want to remain in office. It's the same thing with someone like Rupert Murdoch. People who know Rupert Murdoch very well and people who have reported on Murdoch said, if you could convince Rupert Murdoch tomorrow that he would become even richer and Fox News would become even more successful if they shifted it to become like a socialist progressive network, he'd do it in a heartbeat, because he's about money and power and status. So it's the same thing for politicians. There's very few politicians that are actually pure and actually believe what they say. I truly think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Bernie Sanders would rather be in office a shorter amount of time if it means fighting for what counts. So I think Ezra Klein and these people in the clouds that, you'll never get 60 votes for a Medicare for All if Bernie was president, this and that, are basically assuming that it would be the same political structure, the same motivations, the same dynamic, and the same consequences for the Democratic establishment and Republicans, whereas they're just going to do what they're doing now and have the same opposition that they're having now, only double because it's Bernie Sanders as president. I think it's the opposite. If Bernie Sanders is president, they talk about the Obama coalition. Well, if Bernie Sanders becomes president, you better believe that there has been a major demographic and electorate and shift in the electorate. That same shift will be coming figuratively, guns a-blazing, for the midterms, after Bernie Sanders' first midterms as president, governor's races, local races, you name it. So these people are either going to do what Bernie Sanders is talking about and look outside their window and smell the political winds have radically changed and pretend to be progressives now and start voting for things that will help actual people, or they're going to be bounced from office. That's the truth. So I think it's pretty. I don't expect anything. I don't expect anything radically different from someone like Ezra Klein and these naysayers who say, it'll never pass. Bernie Sanders, it's a pipe dream, because they're not in tune with the electorate. They're paid not to be in tune with the electorate. They're actually paid not to actually go out and talk to anyone. So that's the truth. But where I disagree with Bernie, I say get rid of the filibuster. Get rid of it. It should not exist, frankly. If it were up to me, we'd have a parliamentary system. Because at the end of the day, we are not representing the will of the people right now with this filibuster rule. It is a rule that allows obstruction endlessly. Republicans obviously have used it. I mean, whether I like Obama or not, they stymied most of what he tried to do. And Democrats, some occasionally use it, not as much. But the bottom line is, if the will of the people have voted for President Sanders, or even President Donald Trump, that is, yes, through elections, you can try and change people's minds and get them out of office. But until then, the presidents should have a right. Presidents should have a right. And the Congress that is supposed to execute your party's wishes, so if it is Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Party should be trying to execute the president's vision and policies. That's how American politics is supposed to work. The other party should not be endlessly allowed to obstruct. And you know, the filibuster, there's been studies on this, has the overuse of it has disproportionately hurt black people and minorities, because a lot of the legislation stopped by use of the filibuster has been it has been implemented by the Republicans to stop legislation that would help black people and minorities and poor people. I still think there should be the ability for senators to stand up as long as they want. If you want to, maybe it wouldn't be called the filibuster, but if you want to go on for 10 hours to delay a vote or whatever to make your point, I think that's a good thing. That's the point of having the floor on the House or the Senate. But I disagree with Bernie. I think the filibuster is not a democratic thing, and I think we should have more of a parliamentary system. It doesn't mean that there can't be debate. It doesn't mean that if it's Bernie Sanders as president, Republicans can't vociferously debate against whatever policy he's trying to do, and vice versa. But there shouldn't be these means that basically just make in essence, what the filibuster does is make the minority party effectively the majority party. It tilts the playing field to allow the minority to have more power and leverage than the majority and the elected president. That's not democratic, period. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statusquo.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statusquo.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.